De Brexit. De politieke chaos in het Verenigd Koninkrijk duurt voort en voort. Afgelopen vrijdag is het plan van premier Theresa May voor een Brexit voor de derde keer weggestemd. En nog steeds lijkt May de handdoek niet in de ring te willen gooien. Volgende week wil ze dat er opnieuw voor de vierde keer over haar voorstel wordt gestemd. Het land lijkt ondertussen al even verscheurd als het parlement. Bij mij aan tafel publicist en auteur Douglas Murray. Hij is medewerker van het pro-Brexit weekblad The Spectator en schrijver van het boek The Strange Death of Europe. Dit gesprek wordt overigens live ondertiteld en daarom met een kleine vertraging uitgezonden. Mr. Murray, welcome.
Very good to be with you.
You were supposed to leave the European Union last Friday, but you're still in.
Yes.
Are you disappointed?
Yes, I mean, I'm disappointed in the same way that I think the majority of the British people are disappointed. I voted leave almost 3 years ago, like most British people. And
there was a majority.
It was a majority, yeah. So like most people in Britain, I voted to leave. And I didn't expect, I don't think anyone particularly did, that 3 years on almost, we would still be in. We would still have the discussion about whether we were really going to leave, and watching Parliament trying to, in significant chunks, find ways to trick us into not leaving. This is a profound and strange moment in our democracy in Britain. We're not used to this. This is the first time that the British people have gone to the polls and an elite has not accepted the result of the vote. Right. We've never had that.
We're going to talk about the elites, but first have a look at the current situation, because last week was an absolute chaos.
Sure.
There was no majority for any of the 8 alternatives for May's deal. And the House of Commons seems better in saying what they don't want instead of what they do want.
Well, there's a reason for that, which is that, and this is one of the central problems that we've had in our country, which is the British public voted in a majority to leave the European Union. But of our parliamentarians, the MPs in Westminster, 2/3 were in favour of remaining in the European Union. So we had this very strange situation where parliamentarians were committed to something that the British people were not committed to, so that they had to fake enthusiasm for leaving or find other ways to get around it. We have, what's more, a Prime Minister who campaigned to remain in the European Union, who is leading the country, apparently, out of the European Union.
You distrust them, huh? It's an elite that refuses to listen to the people.
Well,
is that your
I don't actually distrust. I have a profound faith in democracy, or certainly had a profound faith in democracy in my country. I certainly didn't expect we would end up in a position like this, where there is so much feeling that Parliament is just not willing to do what the people asked. But no, I mean, it is a very profoundly shaking moment, because for the House of Commons, they say not to do what the British people asked. You're right that they have found it very, very hard to come up with any sort of positive answer. But I would suggest that starts with the fact that they don't want to do the thing which the British people want them to do.
Yeah, they refuse to listen.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one quick example, if I may. There was a discussion on the equivalent programme of this in the UK a few weeks ago, if there is an equivalent. And there was a discussion there, and there was a discussion about whether or not we should have another referendum, of course, which is one of those ways in which you can drive people in Britain absolutely mad. And this discussion included somebody seriously saying, well, we've got to discuss what would be on the ballot paper, because you'd obviously have to have May's deal or remain or no deal. And somebody else said perfectly seriously, no. You couldn't have no deal on the ballot in a second referendum because the people might vote for it.
All right.
So that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, from your point of view...
No. From anyone's point of view who believes in democracy, you can't just not offer people things in case they like them and vote for them.
Right. But you mentioned several reasons why it's not happening at this moment.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at them. You already mentioned Theresa May. Is she to blame?
She has to take a very significant amount of the blame, yes.
Explain.
Well, first of all, I mean, of course, there are lots of reasons one could blame Theresa May. By the way, there's a lot to admire in her as well. It's a very thankless job. A lot of other people didn't want it. A lot of people who did want it mucked up their run to get the job.
But in which way is she to blame?
Well, I think most people feel several things. One is that throughout this process she has been incredibly careful in a way which might not have been the right tactic from the beginning. Maybe the right tactic from the beginning was to go in and say, we're perfectly happy to leave without doing any deal. We're perfectly willing to play some kind of hard ball. We're not coming with a begging bowl, and approach it that way. But she's a very conciliatory politician in lots of ways, and she was, after she called a very, very unwise election in 2017, she was running a minority government, which again is very uncommon in the UK. But the main thing was that she's now in this position because she called an election after the referendum, hoping to give herself a bigger majority, and in actual fact, losing the Conservative Party's majority, that she's been in a coalition government in a very weak position. And perhaps, at the very least, it's hard to unite a parliament that's already not in favour of your policy if you also are not the majority, you're not a governing party.
Yeah. And it's not one of your problems that you distrust her because she initially voted to remain, and now she has to deliver a Brexit.
Yes,
unless she said Brexit means Brexit.
Yes, I think a lot of people just distrust. It's true that Theresa May she wasn't exactly the most fervent supporter of remaining in the European Union. Yeah, she gave one speech throughout the campaign and otherwise kept pretty silent. But I think that nevertheless, if you have a vote like this and the British people say something so unusual, so clear, really, to say we were offered this chance once to vote, leave or remain, we voted to leave, you should probably be led by a political leader who is passionately in favour of the thing that the British people asked for, yes.
Yeah. But you repeatedly say that Theresa May and the Parliament are not listening to what the people want. But what do the people want?
Well, actually, we can tell, among other things, by if you go over what everybody on both sides of the campaign said in the campaign. Both sides were extremely clear. This is a once-in-a-lifetime vote. You're not going to get to vote again. This matters an enormous amount. And they also, both sides, leave and remain, said it includes leaving the customs union, the common market. Everyone said that. Even Blair said that. Even Mandelson said that. Even the most pro-EU people said, be under no illusions. This is one vote once, and it's out completely.
Yeah, if we're leaving.
If we leave.
Yeah.
And so the British people said, well, we like the sound of that.
Yeah.
And they voted to leave. And then we have this strange 3-year period of, well, what did they really mean when they said we want to leave? Did they mean we want to sort of pretend to remain? Or did they mean we didn't really mean it? Or did they mean we should really stay in the customs union? No, they voted to leave the whole thing.
Clear? Wasn't that
It was
so
that clear.
Yeah.
It was that clear from both sides of the campaign.
Isn't that the heart of the problem, that you ask the people if they want to leave, but not how?
Well, as I say, I think that it was clear because, as I say, both sides of the campaign said absolutely clearly it's out of the whole thing. It's not remaining with, like, a foot in the EU or a hand around the door, let alone get straight back in afterwards. They were very clear about this. The British people knew, and they knew that they were taking a jump. They were making a jump.
Yeah.
And as I say, of course that's more difficult than staying in, because staying in would have just remained something like the status quo. So yes, it was a revolution in a way in our politics, which Parliament has not accepted.
Let's make it personal, because you voted for Brexit. For a majority of the Dutch people, it's quite hard to understand why you want to leave, because we, as member of the European Union, are looking at the benefits of the European Union as well. It brought us stability, it brought us prosperity, and above all, it brought us peace since the Second World War.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
You're not sure about that?
No, I wouldn't
mention one war.
I really wouldn't fall for the idea that the European Union is the reason we haven't all. I wouldn't fall for the idea that the European Union is the reason why France hasn't been invaded by Germany. It's a reductio ad absurdum, this.
It's absurd.
There are all sorts of benefits of the EU. I don't deny them for a moment. But I don't think they should be overstated to this extent.
Well, is that the case when we're talking about peace?
Well, no, look, there are trading and financial reasons to be in it. I don't doubt that. The British people didn't doubt that. And I think that the case of what the EU has managed to achieve has been massively overestimated and overstated by supporters of it. That having been said, what were the problems that the British people picked up on? I would suggest there's some of the same problems that voters in this country picked up on when the Lisbon Treaty was voted upon, when the French got a chance to vote, and when the Irish got a chance to vote, and of course were told they'd voted the wrong way and had to vote again. It's basically something like this, which is that we were in Britain, we voted to get into the common market. We voted because we liked that idea. And then something happened over the decades that followed, and in particular at Maastricht. At Maastricht, I remember it, I wasn't that old at the time, but it was the moment when everything started to change. The idea of ever closer union simply was something that the British people were not up for. They didn't understand why we had to get ever closer. Why not a union that works and is good, that then stays there and doesn't want to keep going and get closer and closer, and then you hear things like the European army and so on, and we just weren't up for that. We just weren't up for that.
They're talking about an army. It's not there.
Well, yeah, I know, but even since the referendum, the talks got more and more. So it's not like we invented it in Britain as something that was in the minds of EU bureaucrats. It was something. It's an example of the sort of thing that we're just not up for. So as I say, the point is that over recent decades, it started to change. And then I think that there is something very fundamental that the British people realised about this, which you in the Netherlands may not see or feel a problem about, but we in Britain really did. And it was something like this. People said, oh, well, the sovereignty issue is too abstract, and people didn't vote on sovereignty. I can tell you, sovereignty was the massive issue in this. And there's one thing.
Once we were a big empire.
It was something like this. No, nothing to do. It was. In Britain, there has always been. I mean, we've had a stable democracy for a very long time now, and it basically runs on the idea that you know how you vote somebody in, and you know how to get them out. And it's absolutely central to democracy in Britain. And over recent years, and people will dispute this, and other people say this is a fantasy in the heads of mad Brexiteers, but over recent years, there just was a growing sense in my country that we no longer were sure that we knew how we were governed. And you could see it in the way even in which, I mean, I spent quite a lot of my time in Westminster. You could see it in the way in which Parliament in Westminster behaved. It became less and less like a parliament and more like a sort of local council chamber, where MPs, you know, they had an important job that would have been once the role of a councillor, and every now and then they could vote on something important. But it wasn't the hub of democracy that it had been. And so when the British people were asked again if they wanted to be part of this thing which included us in this huge umbrella, where the governance is, and let's face it, even the most EU lover would admit that it's pretty hard to explain some of the workings of the EU, and they just didn't like that.
All right,
they wanted to know how they were governed, and they wanted one other crucial thing. May I say?
No.
Okay, I will anyway.
Let's have a look at the options which are left from your point of view to left this bureaucratic monster called European Union.
That's your words, not mine.
All right. The options are an extension, a hard Brexit, a no Brexit, or probably new elections. What's most likely, do you think?
I gave up predicting a long time ago.
All right.
There are so many variables in this whole thing. The variables exist in the Conservative Party, which is meant to be the reliable party of government and has shown itself to be anything but. There's so many variables just in the head of Theresa May that it's not really possible to bet. I would say we do have to leave. We do have to leave. And I think that even the most...
Because otherwise, what happened?
You basically rupture the contract between the public and our political establishment. You rupture completely the contract between the public and Parliament. And I think... I don't say that means we're going to become like Gilets jaunes or something, but that we've not been in that territory before. So we do have to leave, and I think they know that. I suspect that we'll find some way of muddling along and then find some way of muddling out. But one point, may I just say, by the way, is that we in Britain have flayed our political class over the last few years, and there's going to be a lot more flaying to come. I mean, the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, we have not had very competent politicians, and they haven't behaved very well with the mandate we gave them to do what we asked them to do. But, if I may say so, we have looked with great interest at the non-movement that has happened in Brussels, and I'm particularly interested in this, because if if we in Britain vote for this thing that's so monumental in our history, and then the political class is churned around and beaten up by the people and so on, and then we look at Brussels and we see Jean-Claude Juncker is still there, everyone's still there, you lose one of the biggest contributors to the EU budget, you lose Britain, and everybody stays.
But
everybody stays. And so we look at this and we think,
Douglas,
maybe that's another good reason to leave.
Probably
they never go.
Yeah, probably.
They never take a lesson.
Mr. Douglas, probably
they never hear anything.
It's better to look at your own mess.
Sure, I'm very happy to look at my own mess.
Yeah.
I don't think I've avoided it
Who's
today.
going to rescue you in the Conservative Party? Is it Boris Johnson?
I think that the country has to be led by somebody who wants the same thing that the country voted for. So it has to be a Brexiteer. My own view is that Boris Johnson is... by the way, he was my first editor at the Spectator many years ago. I don't think anyone has ever thought that he's a great details person. I don't think anyone has ever thought
we can agree.
He's a normal politician. But there is one thing, apart from being pro-Brexit, that he has, which is very unusual. Boris Johnson has been, in my lifetime, pretty much the only politician who, when you mention him to a member of the public, they smile and they feel better about things. Almost everybody else, it's like, yeah, that person did this and da, da, da. But Boris, admittedly, he's taken a hit since the EU vote. Boris, if you mention him to the general public, like, Boris, like this. Now, I'm just saying this because this might be a time when we need somebody who has an unusual political gift. The gift that says, I'm not going to be great on the details, my deputy will do that, but I'm going to be the ambassador for Britain. And I think we could do with that. We could do with something other than a second run at Theresa May's sort of leadership style.
My last question for you. You were here in the Netherlands for a couple of days, and you met a Dutch politician.
I met lots of Dutch. I meet lots of Dutch politicians.
Who were the lucky ones?
No, I'm not betraying confidences. I've been coming to this country for about 15 or so years, and I've known a lot of your politicians.
Why is it secret?
No. I don't betray confidences.
Is he called Thierry Baudet?
I'm not referring to it.
What?
I happen to know Thierry Baudet, it's true. But I've been coming here for a long time because I find your politics fascinating. You are very unlike my country, because in this country you have this system that means that you can vote for parties and the public are heard very fast, whereas in my country we vote for parties and it happens very slow, and we have this two-party system. So I do find it fascinating. I find many of your politicians fascinating. Obviously there are some that I find sympathy with more than others. And